Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Sex, Lies, and Consciousness with your luscious hostess, May Vu, broadcasting live every Monday at 12 noon Pacific Time.
Hello, everyone. This is May Vu, and welcome to another wonderful conversation that I'm about to have today on Sex, Lies, and Consciousness Radio. This is the beginning of my big work, I think. Ever since I've been doing this show and talking about sex with all different walks of life and all different people, and the one thing that started to come up for me is how do we as parents raise sexually healthy, sexually conscious kids? And how do we talk to kids about sex? How do we help them maneuver through this crazy terrain that we ourselves, barely making it through it alive ourselves? So I think this is really important, and it's so special to me that I'm just thrilled to be beginning to have conversations with my friends and colleagues and sex coaches and teachers out there around this so that we can have a better handle on this thing. So today I have with me my beautiful friend, Lisa Marie Hayes, and she is also another radio host, so she'll tell you all about that in a minute. But she's also a mom, and she raised a son, and so she's going to share with us her journey on what it's like to raise her son as to be a sexually responsible and conscious guy. It's a story that doesn't have an ending yet. It's an unfolding story, and I'm just excited to have this tender conversation with her. So, welcome, Lisa.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, so before we dive into the topic, will you just share with the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and and even that your own radio show, so that people can have a sense of that. And then at the end of the show, we'll repeat the information so they know how to find you.
I'm easy to find. You can find me at lisamhayes.com, and I am a law of attraction relationship coach. All things love and relationship. It's my mission in life to make sure that everybody's getting the love they want the way they like it. So it's a wonderful job. I'm the love whisperer, and I think that is just, I don't know. It's the best thing in the world to be doing, is to help people find ways to get what they really want out of love and relationships, and leverage the universe and deliberate creation to make that easier for them.
Yippee! Yay! I also want to just publicly thank Lisa for your support of me. A year and a half ago, almost 2 years now, where I was just being called to do something like this, and you just really walked me through the process of doing a radio show and show me the rope, and I just thought that was so generous, and it really have launched my work now in my world. So I really appreciate you for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, look at where you've gone in a year and a half. Oh, my goodness.
I get about 7,000 archive listeners a month. That's pretty good, for just doing what you love, and the people will come, I guess. So let's dive into this. So tell us a little bit about you as a mom, and and your relationship with your son, and let's ease our way into this conversation.
Okay. I have two children. I have a 23-year-old and I have a 5-year-old. And my oldest, his father and I separated when he was about 3 years old. And so I was single mom from about 3 until about 17. It was just him and I. Mm-hmm. And I met my beloved when Caleb turned about 17. But during those sort of formative years, it was just the two of us. He didn't have a lot of contact with his father. Mm-hmm. So all of the life, love, sex, those sorts of lessons, that was on me to figure out how to do that with a boy. And I think that I had very little exposure to sex or sex education or sex as a topic, sex as a normal topic at all. as a child growing up in my home, it was kind of a taboo sort of topic. It was really hands-off.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversations that I did have with my parents about sex growing up felt pretty confrontational. I mean, when it did sort of bleed through to the top, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't, it wasn't appropriate, so to speak. So when I found myself as a parent with a boy by myself, I had to make some real conscious decisions, like be very intentional about how I wanted to be in the world around the subject of sex and sexuality with this boy who we know, who is now, I mean, we knew that he would be a sexually active man at some point. And the contrast that I had growing up provided me some very fertile inspiration for doing things very, very differently than the way I had learned that as a child.
That is such a big conversation. I mean, like, I'm sure it doesn't just kind of like, I like to think of it like, yeah, like the lightning struck and then you just had this, I have to be intentional how I want. But I'm sure it's a coming about conversation with yourself, isn't it?
It was a coming about conversation. It was, yes. And I think that I wanted him, what I wanted more than anything, my fundamental motivation was that I wanted it to be okay for him to talk to me about anything.
Mm-hmm.
That was the driving force behind a lot of the choices that I made in my home. Like, I needed it to be absolutely okay, and not just okay, because I think a lot of parents have that rule, like, come to me with anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted it to be comfortable, and that's like a whole different layer right there, because okay and comfortable are two different things, and sex is one of the most difficult things to talk about for anybody. And then you add in a parent-child relationship, and you make that parent-child relationship mother-son or potentially father-daughter. It's more complicated. So I felt like I had to sort of overreach to create an environment that was going to be comfortable enough that when the time came, we could have any conversation he needed to have.
So here's what's important. When did you start to cultivate this comfortable environment so that you could have a comfortable conversation with your son when he's 16 or 18 talking about sex? When do you start cultivating that?
I think early, really early.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying talking to your 4-year-old about sex is appropriate, but I think that, talking to your 4-year-old about bodies is appropriate. Starting very, very, very early and talking about things in a very natural and matter-of-fact way. What your body parts are, what other body parts are, what those parts do, how things work, how, all of that stuff. The sooner you start, the more it is easy for not just them, but you. I mean, when you establish a vocabulary from the very beginning that is real and honest, then you're not having to introduce those things at a later date when it can be awkward and angst-making. So I'm saying early, like from the very, very beginning, you set an environment that says that these words, this topic, these ideas, these are natural and normal, and we talk about this in our home.
I totally agree with you. I mean, like, I have a daughter, and I wanted the same thing. More than anything, I want to be able to have the space where she can talk to me about anything comfortably, safely, and know that she wouldn't have to be afraid to do it, even though, knowing that talking about any of this stuff brings up so much fear anyway. And really, I started very young also, like all the way to like when she started walking, and just I remember when I had my period and I chose not to shut the door on her, that if she was curious and she asked what she was looking at, that it was okay. Like, that was really bold for me, because I was like, there's a part of me that going, is this the right way to parent? Am I doing this right? But then I thought, well, how is she going to be okay with this? How is she going to treat it okay if the first 10 years of her life, I shut her out and said, go away. I'm doing something here. And then later on, talk to her that her period is beautiful. The message that I haven't sent her that message. So it's really contrary to what my body feels like. Am I supposed to be saying that and doing that with her?
And yet, why not? Because we set the stage, right? I think there's so many layers to this that in preparation for this conversation, I was sort of thinking about what does it really take. And initially I had thought, how do you raise a sexually responsible boy? The first answer to that question to me was you teach boys to respect women. But that's really sort of a second.
Yeah, it does, right?
You've got to teach them to respect themselves and their bodies first. And then you teach them to respect women and women's bodies. And then you go kind of from there, but it starts with yourself.
But wait. And you can't teach them to respect their body unless you respect their body.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And you can't teach them to respect the woman unless you respect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where there's a disconnect a lot of time I see, sometimes I think, we look in the mirror and we don't like the way our love handle is, or we shun ourselves in so many ways that in a way, even though our words say you should respect women, but if we don't respect ourselves, there goes the message.
Well, have you seen that article that went around Facebook a couple of weeks ago about the little girl who, and I'm not going to quote this right, but it said in the article, I was 12 when I realized my mother was fat.
Oh, yes,
was ugly and fat.
Right.
And I really thought about that, in the heart of what you're saying, we have to respect ourselves. If I don't love my body and cherish myself, I'm my child's first lesson there. And I have a boy, you have a girl, so the dynamics are slightly different. But by loving who I am and really, really owning and respecting my own body, I'm teaching him what it means, and you are doing the same. So we can't teach something we aren't. Children don't do what we say; they do who we are.
Exactly. And I literally, my least favorite part of my body is the side between my legs. The fat part between your thighs. Am I describing that right?
Yeah.
The inner thighs. And I don't like the stretch marks on there. I've had it ever since I was 16, and I hated it. But I swear, I literally have to come to peace with that and show it to her and said, "Mommy's learning to love this part. It's okay." But because I can't have her. I can't make her love the rest of her body if I don't love the rest of my body.
Right.
It's so hard. So you have a list that you're thinking, well, where does it start? So it starts with teaching the boy to respect himself. And then it starts with teaching him to respect a woman. Where else? Where to next?
Kind of where we sort of started, normalizing to the greatest degree possible, stretching yourself to find new levels of appropriateness, but normalizing the idea, the concept, and a vocabulary around sex and bodies. So that those are words that we speak without a charge in the home. That you can say the word penis without going,
exactly.
or vagina without going, that those are words that we use and we're not ashamed of them. We're able to do that. Normalizing that vocabulary in your home at a very early age.
I have to tell you, I think I've over-normalized that because now every time I said vagina or penis, my daughter would look at me. She's 12. She would say, "Mom, we don't use those words. We use nana and shushun." And I'm like, what? Or we go out and meet her friends' parents, and she'll be like, "Mama, do you know that these people are really conservative, right? They're really, really conservative. You really should tone back." And I'm like, "Really? So are you going to be editing me the whole dinner, honey?" Oh man, there's just no right way. There's just no free way of doing this, right? Whatever we do, they'll fight us on the other side.
But my thing here is, what's most important in the long run for your daughter? And this is a really good example. Is it more important that she's always super comfortable that you're going to be randomly or consistently appropriate by conservative standards? That's one thing. Or is it more important that when she's a year or 2 or 3 or 4, whenever it happens for her, and she's experimenting or curious or wondering, and she's engaging in exploration out in the world, that she can come and talk to you. Like, which one of those two things is more important? Because I had the best parents in the world, by the way. I'm not harshing with them, but this was one area where I chose to do differently. My parents were always conservatively appropriate, by the way.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think there's another category in there, Lisa, which is I'm starting to see a glimpse of it, which is it's more, to me, it's even more important that she can assess the situation and see what's needed. So, so she assessed the situation and she thinks this is the appropriate way to do it. And then there are other friends of her that she'll say, oh, that's okay, Mom. I think these guys can handle you, and, it'll be fun, and I'll watch and see. So I think that level of intelligence and respect for how she see life and how she see people and what people need is also so important to help raise her, to help cultivate for her that ability.
Well, and something else important there happened. Like, she was able to say to you, Mom, you might want to tone it down. Like, she felt comfortable enough with you to do that. She made the assessment, but then beyond that assessment, she felt okay. And I think that that's another piece of this. Like, normalizing a conversation isn't going to help if you're not having conversations with your children anyway about sports and about politics and about what happened in math class and about, the ride home on the bus. Like, you've got to be able to be in dialogue with your children on lots and lots of different levels and have all of those conversations be what they are and be able to be with them wherever they're at in order for these kinds of conversations to happen anyway.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes you overshoot, sometimes you undershoot, sometimes you miss it completely. It's just like it's not easy.
And yet, the cool thing, and I remind myself about this a lot, like, I feel free to remind me anytime in the future. Like, the cool thing about our kids is there's usually a tomorrow. Like, we don't always have to get it right in the moment. And I think that's really important when we're dealing with a subject that's really potentially uncomfortable, like sex or any other subject. Like, today didn't have to go perfectly. In fact, today might have been a complete bomb. Mm-hmm. But chances are pretty good we're going to get tomorrow. So tomorrow we get to get up and do this again and adjust and readjust. And children are growing and changing, and we're growing and changing. So it's never going to be exactly the same way anyhow. Like, a lot of self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
A heavy dose of self-love and self-acceptance in parenting makes all the difference, because it's not going to be perfect. You are going to overshoot and undershoot and miss completely, and that's part of it. But we show up for our kids the next day anyway.
Yeah. So how do you know that you're having a sexually responsible boy?
How do you know? You pray.
No, I know, right? You pray and you hope not to have to knock on the door or anything like that.
Right.
Or that surprise phone call.
No, I mean, you do the best. I mean, and I think that this is really important. I mean, I think as parents, we intuitively know that we do the best we can, and then we send them out into the world, and the only thing we've got is that we did the best we could.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents don't feel that certainty when it comes to sexual education in the home, because they outsource it to the school, or they outsource it to a church, or they outsource it to somebody. Like, they don't have that certainty that on that one critically important subject, they were engaged, they were in the game, and they did the best they could. Mm-hmm. I mean, anything can happen out there and you don't know. But when you did the best you could, you at least then you've got that much. And kids do listen, but more than that, I do think, like we talked about earlier, kids also observe.
Oh, so much more.
So much more.
Yeah.
So how we are is what they're learning. And I think what we want them to learn, I don't necessarily want my children to become me. Mm. But I do want them to learn from me that I respect myself, I value myself, I hold myself as highly important. Mm-hmm. And when I'm making decisions around sexuality, that is first and foremost. And because I do that, then I can be respectful with others. If I can be that much and communicate that much through my parenting, then everything else is probably going to fall into place.
I don't know why this question just popped up, but like, how are you with body shame? You know how like we're so I'm guessing because my parents are very conservative too. Like we never walk around naked, blah blah blah. Always turn the light off and all this stuff, right? And it just creates such a deep sense of body shame that I have to undo over time. And so, like, how were you with that? And what did you teach him around that?
You know, it's interesting looking back. I am, you've got 7,000 downloads each week. I mean, everybody's going to hear this, but I'm really comfortable naked. I mean, that's just who I am as a person.
Yeah.
I'm really comfortable naked.
Mm-hmm.
And in a home with a boy, like, I let him lead that party. When it was clear to me that he needed, in his development, more privacy, you know, he was feeling a stronger sense of modesty, then I let him lead that party. And so I never wanted him to feel like my body, his body, anybody's body was bad or shameful or scary. But I also wanted to be really respectful of the boundaries that he put up. And he did. I mean, as he got older, there did come an age, obviously, where he had a lot more modesty and he needed more of those kinds of boundaries. And that was really okay for me. That, you know, bodies are bodies, they're beautiful. And as long as we're all respecting each other's space, then bodies remain a beautiful thing. And part of respecting space was respecting his.
Yeah, and I'm getting more questions coming in with more edge. So the first thing that I'm thinking of is like, you know, I have a girl, so it's so easy for us to cuddle. She's 12, and we still cuddle and we sleep together at night. And I just feel, and I can tell, like, when my girl doesn't have enough cuddle time, she gets grumpy. She gets like she's missing something. And then I'll be like, do you need some cuddle time? Just some winding down time? And she'd be like, yeah. And then we'd cuddle and all is better. How does that work with a boy? And when do you stop cuddling a boy? And, you know, and then what's the missing on that one for them?
You know, we used to joke around when Caleb was 12 or 13 that he'd be 23 and he'd still, you know, want to come lay down next to me or put his head on my lap or cuddle with me and watch TV.
Yeah.
Like, that was always okay. And there did, I think, come a period of time again where he backed off of that a little bit on his own. But I mean, to this day, now older, we can sit next to each other on the couch, arms wrapped around each other, him laying with his head on my lap and watching TV. Like, that boundary of body between mother and child is very, very pure unless we make it otherwise.
Right.
And the fact that he was a boy didn't change that for me. Like, I still... And he still, I think, felt very comfortable to have a lot of touch and a lot of non-sexual physical intimacy.
Yeah. I think that's so important because I think men crave that as they grow up. If they didn't have enough of that, I think we all do, actually. I think we just crave to be touched and held and loved in that pure innocence, non-sexual, threatening way.
And like I said, bodies are pure unless we make them otherwise, unless we do that with behavior or attitude. And we're in charge of that. Like, how do we want our kids to present in the world? Do we want them to be uncomfortable, to be uncertain, to have questions, to not be getting enough? Because let's face it, enough touch, that's everything. If you're getting enough physical touch and love and intimacy that way, I would venture to say, so I'm going to go out on a limb, but I would venture to say that children who get enough of that are less likely to engage in dangerous sexual behavior in the world because they've got their fill, they're full. And so they're not grasping, trying to get something that they can't identify sexually when really they didn't want a sexual experience. They just wanted to be touched.
Right. And I just saw a glimpse of that too. And equally on the other side, when you get enough touch, it's an indication too that he or she knew how to ask for it. Like this is so subtle, but it's like I think what happens to adults is that we don't get enough touch and we don't get enough cuddle, we don't get enough that physical love, the pureness of it, and then we don't know how to ask for it because it's all awkward and cumbersome when we were growing up, and we were never encouraged to ask for it.
Right.
And so we can't create it for ourselves, and when you can't create it then you kind of like loop downward like the toilet bowl kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. So then what about boobs? I have this thing, this belief that men are so fascinated with boobs because they never got enough booby time. I mean, like, okay, that's it. I'm coming clean. I have this belief that men are just fascinated with boobs because they never got enough. They just like spend the rest of their time looking for it.
There's such an interesting, I'm stumbling for words because I'm trying to find the appropriate way to put this so that I don't set off those buzzers. But, I mean, I've got a 5-year-old. I mean, I have a 5-year-old boy, and it is amazing to me how somewhat fascinated, even at that age, he is with breasts. Because let's face it, breasts are nice, right? Yeah. They're soft, they're cushy, they're comforting, they're there. And, we kind of laugh. Like, how do you even manage that? We need to teach him to be appropriate, not to touch other people's breasts and not to be out in the world doing that. But it is a natural response. And I think how, at this age, like at 5, how we deal with that with him, like I don't want him to touch random people's breasts, but I also don't want to shame him for that urge. And it's not really an urge. It's more like a curiosity, like, oh, those are nice. Can I touch?
I think it's more than just curiosity. I think there's a lot of love. This is life force. It's right here, right? The bosom of life here. And just looking at my daughter, even now as almost preteen, right? Sometimes, she just loves the breast. She loves it, and it's okay because she's a girl and I'm a girl, and so she can touch it, and we don't have that weirdness going on. But I could see, if she was a boy, I would have a lot to undo in my head to be okay with that, and then I'd be like really. But I think there's something there that somehow we cut off from the boy, the opposite sex thing, and then it just creates this longing and this lifetime of search or something.
It's last night even. I mean, we'd put our little one to bed and we were sitting in bed. My husband was working and my Kingston came in and climbed in bed, and repeatedly we kept saying, go back to bed, and he just was ignoring that and continuing to advance towards our bed, and we were saying, you need to go back to your bed, and he's just continuing to advance. And he climbed up in bed and climbed up next to me and put his head down on my breast.
Yeah.
And he was asleep instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly. Like that, it was like this magnetic pull to come in and just like cuddle up and be in that safe place and have arms around him and rest his head there, and he was out like a rock. And I think that is a valid question. Like, is that still okay if he's 12 or 15? That's a question. And I think the answer to that question is how far can you let it be okay? Because the minute the energy shifts in you,
right,
then that undefinable, unspoken energetic shift changes everything. And so I ask, generally I would advise, allow yourself to stretch a little beyond your programming, your innate limits. Like, question that and see if you can go a little further with it, to allow that nurturing and intimacy if you have a boy.
Yeah.
But when it shifts, it shifts. Like, you can't lie. Once you're uncomfortable, you can't hide that.
I'm going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk a bit more about that, this whole listening to your insight and your guidance and when the energy shifts. I think that's a really important place for us to highlight some more.
Okay.
Is your marriage or relationship in crisis? Where one partner wants to expand into their sex and bring scary changes to the relationship, while the other partner is dug in, protective, and saying, "No way in hell is this going to happen." May knows this place well, and she can help both sides. She is truly amazing. Learn more about her specialty, crisis coaching for couples and individuals, at sexliesandconsciousness.com.
And we're back, and this is May, and today I am talking with my friend Lisa Marie Hay on how to raise, or her experience of raising a sexually responsible boy. What an important topic, you know. How do we stretch our boundaries, our conditioning? Really, it's not boundaries, it's more the conditioning that we have that's been passed down to us by our parents and our society that probably are outdated and doesn't really work well, because we see what's happening out here with all the adults walking around on this planet looking for love and getting so confused around sex. Like, how do we raise our kids so that they're not walking around confused around sex? So, Lisa, come on back in. And Lisa, before we dive in, tell them, just give them again, how do they find you if they'd like to get a hold of you?
You can find me at lisamhays.com.
Excellent. So yeah, what do you think? What are the tasks at hand for us, you know, to raise our children so that they're not walking around sexually confused?
Well, and I think we kind of left off at listening to that inner voice.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And your thought about, you know, our childhood programming, the societal programming, like all of that, I think there's something very, very necessary, almost like urgent. There's an urgency around this, that we find a way to separate our inner voice when it comes to parenting in general, but particularly around subjects like sex, and our mommy's voice and our daddy's voice and our neighbor's voice and the church's voice and the TV's voice. Like, all of those voices are in our head, and the messages about sex are so incredibly confusing. I mean, what we get from the media and advertising and movies and television is one message, and what we probably got at home as children was another message. And so finding our own voice when it comes to this, so that we can feel those subtle shifts and those changes and the awareness within ourselves, that requires a lot of willingness to open up to that awareness, to be able to decide, okay, this is what I feel and hear for myself and my children. And I would assume, I mean, I'm in the process of experiencing that because I'm doing it the second time around. What worked for one child may not be the rule for another child, even in my own home.
So give us an example. What worked for the first one, the older one, and is not working for the second one?
You know, I haven't found that yet, because the same rules are applying and it's going. I mean, but I think in a lot of ways, and I'm generalizing here, children at a young age are pretty simple. It's all really easy right now.
Yep.
And when we get to adolescence and hormones and things shift and change, I can't say that Kingston is going to be the same kid as Caleb. In fact, I can say he won't be. So assuming that what worked before will work again might be a wrong assumption. And so that willingness, again, to be quiet and be present to the awareness of what's happening between myself and my child now, sort of to the exclusion of everything else around us, all of this noise around us about the topic of sex, that might be the only advice there is to offer. Like, it's...
You know, okay, so here we go with the edgy thing again.
Let's go edgy. Let's do it.
Okay. I struggle with this in my head, and I don't have an answer. So I'd love for us to talk about this. So when our children were born, you know, we show them how to eat by eating in front of them, right? And by feeding them. So we show them how to eat in so many ways. And then we also train them how to go potty. Like, we show them how to go potty, and we sometimes even, like, here, mommy sit here and you sit there, you know, and then we're going to, like, go potty together kind of thing, right? We show them everything, how to write the alphabets and everything. But when it comes to sex, we shut the door, we don't make any noise, we don't say anything, and yet we want to portray this message that sex is good, sex is whole, all is good, you should have sex, but don't wait here, but wait there and wait and begin, and all these craziness, that whole confusion thing about sex. So I'm really wrestling with that. I'm like, I don't feel, like, how do we teach our kids around sex so that it's not the same old conditioning that we've been taught around sex? Because I don't think showing them a movie of all the diseases and everything and tell them that abstinence is the way to go is the appropriate way of teaching them about sex.
Mm-hmm. I think for me it started with just a general being okay with the fact that mom does this. Mom has sex. Mommy does it. That's the fact. Like, I believed my parents probably did have sex. I sort of was suspicious a few times that they were getting it on, but we never knew that. Like, never.
Uh-huh.
Because we didn't talk about it. I didn't talk at great length with my child about my sex life, but I didn't hide the fact that there was one, for starters.
Mm-hmm.
I think you and I talked about this, like I was very hands-on about the practicalities of sex. At a very early age,
mm-hmm.
I would take him with me when I went to Planned Parenthood for my, yearly or, every 6-month visits or whatever. It was a great environment. Like, I remember at like 6 or 7 years old, the ladies who worked there, we knew them, and so it was safe, and he would sit in the lobby. And I remember once when he was, probably 6 or 7, walking out, and they had the banana and the condom. They were showing him, this is what we do, and this is what a condom. And I remember thinking, oh, my God, he's 6 or 7.
Mm.
But, we got in the car, and we had a conversation about that at that age that was age appropriate. Like, banana, condom, what'd you think? Ha, ha, ha. But we laughed about it, and it was okay. Like, it was light.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. There is this thing about shut the door, be quiet, like keep it hidden, keep it secret. But that secrecy becomes something you don't want, because if you want your child to be able to discuss with you where they're at in their developing sex life, then you kind of have to have a reasonable, appropriate level of reciprocity, of honesty.
Right, exactly. Right, we don't reveal ourselves and how often and how much we enjoy sex or whatever. We don't reveal any of that. We pretend like it's not there, and and then we scout. We make it very difficult, and then we expect them to tell us about their sex life when they're 16 and share with us what they're discovering. It's like, that ain't gonna happen, honey.
It's not, and it's 16. I don't want to say it's too late. I mean, it's never too late, but that's the worst. It's the most difficult time to jump in.
Totally.
I mean, you can't do it. If you haven't done it and you're up against this wall, certainly, for the love of God, jump in.
Yeah.
But it's harder than at any other time.
What age would you say, like when they start shutting us out, it's like, about 12, 13,
mm-hmm.
right then and there, right? And really, I know that there's a popular belief that this is inappropriate to talk about sex, but really the time where they really listen and start to ask questions is around 8, 9, or 10. That's when we really should just have a more honest conversation than go talk to your mom about it, or talk to your dad.
Where do you want them to start to develop those ideas? This is a really important question, because they're watching movies.
Yep.
Like, they're seeing promiscuity in movies and TV. They're looking at magazines, and they're seeing women splayed out in magazine advertising as a marketing and promotional tool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're absorbing all of this around them. You can't stop that. So do you want them to develop their attitudes? And what we're really talking about here is an attitude about bodies and sex and sexuality that is undefinable. It's an attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want them to develop that attitude external from you or internal within your home, where you can define that sex, what those things mean and how to relate, and start to develop those attitudes, have more influence on it, because it will happen with or without your influence. So And what they see without your input to me, is frightening. I mean, yeah, they might sit in school and they might get the sex ed movie, like you said, with the pictures of diseases. My son got that. Most people do. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to get, a couple of hours here and there of some really frightening indoctrination about sex. But the rest of it is going to be defined in this larger social context unless you're involved in that.
Oh, but wait, there's more. It's a bonus. There's a Ginju set of knives that comes with this one. So, not only that, but you just reminded me that, porn. Porn is the number one sex education now for children. For children, 13 and up, especially mm-hmm. for boys. Mm-hmm. And we so don't know what to do with this thing. We are disgusted by it. We turn our nose on it. We're confused by it. Dad goes to shame and shut the door because Dad's probably watching porn over there, but he can't admit it because if he is and he's locked up for, being a sex addict and all that stuff, Mom can't come closer because that threatens her own sense of security of her own body and her own self-worth and all that stuff. So Mom and Dad are really confused about this, and then meanwhile the kids are looking at porn and learning sex from porn. Ta-da!
Which is, by the way, a fact. No matter if I don't know. I mean, I don't want to make this sound like for everybody, but statistically, we can look at some facts.
Yeah.
And statistically, we know that approximately 90% of boys have experienced pornography before the age of 18.
Yeah.
And so
that's a very nice and polite way of saying that, experience pornography, and I think it's even more than that. Like they're really attracted to it, or like it really is. In Japan, they now are talking about it in the news about how boys in Japan prefer masturbation with porn than having sex with real life people because it's too complicated.
And so I'm going to say something terrible. Well, it's not terrible. This is how I feel. So what?
Yeah.
Right? I did an interview in another radio show last week, and there was a woman who was talking about this very subject, pornography, mm-hmm. and how pornography corrupts the relationship between men and women because boys and men develop a relationship around sex and fantasy, and then when they engage with a woman, it becomes dysfunctional or difficult. It's cold and closed off. That was her thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my thought was, I completely disagree with that thought. I completely and utterly disagree with that thought because the reality of it is that is a reality mm-hmm. and has been for many years. I mean, we have more accessibility to porn because of the Internet than we ever have. But I remember as a very young child going to my neighbor's house and my friend saying, my dad's got Playboy, mm-hmm. And her brother looked at them. So I'm 45. That was well before the Internet. This is a reality that exists. And how we insulate against that reality goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning. Mm-hmm. We teach our children to love and respect themselves and love and respect others. Mm-hmm. And at some point, if you have a boy, mm-hmm. a partner will enter the mix. Mm-hmm. And a partner then will evolve that to the next level of sexuality. I mean, masturbation's great. Let's do it. And pornography may be a part of that. But intercourse is another piece, and making love is yet another element of that. Mm-hmm. And that natural progression into this very multidimensional experience that is sex is just that, a natural progression. But children will find it much more difficult to get to those sort of higher spiritual realms of sexuality if we haven't done our job, which is teach them to love them and respect themselves and love and respect others.
Yes, and I don't want to step away from this too soon. It's just and I think what we're both saying is that it exists. Get with it. Face it. Don't freak out. Don't put more shame on it than necessary, and work with it. Again, this is a really challenging thing, but okay, take that into the conversation with sex with your kids and live with that rather than trying to shut it down, control it, and all that stuff. Because all it does is, like you said, it just creates unintended consequences and add more shame to the kid's psyche around sexuality.
And the unintended consequence is, the worst imaginable unintended consequence around sex is shame. because shame creates hiding, and hiding creates a separation. Then you've created something that's impenetrable.
That's right. So maybe what's here is that it's not the fact that men or boys, use porn and over masturbate themselves and all that stuff, then that created separation, but it's really the shame that got tacked onto that, and that they somehow believe that there's something wrong with them for that, and then they can't talk about it, and then they can't share it with their partner, and then that's where all hell breaks loose. So there's so many layers to this. It's just, I think what we're both saying is just like, take a big deep breath.
Right.
And come close to these things. Everything that you think is bad and wrong, I think we should come closer and look at it a little closer. And not have judgment and not have, don't shut it down. You got to just be in relationship with it.
I mean, it may sound as if we're suggesting porn is okay for boys.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that, but I am saying that shame is the worst antidote to porn. Like, shame will create everything that you think porn, all the big, bad, scary things that some people might hide inside the definition of porn. Shame actually creates those things.
Yeah.
So how you address that within your home, within the construct of your family, is going to be individual. It's going to be unique, maybe, like I said, to each child. However, the worst unintended consequence is shame.
Yeah. Yep. Shame, shut down, isolation. And we have way too much of that when it comes to sexuality.
Well, and you and I both know because of the work we do, right? We're talking about kids. But because of the work we do, we both know that it doesn't end in childhood. If you've got shame and hiding and fear and repression around sexuality, you're set up for a kind of struggle in your adult relationships that you don't want to have.
Not just that, honey. It shows up in your work and how you are as a leader, and how you are as a community member, as a father, and everything, actually. So this whole conflict that stem from shame and the confusion of that needs to be addressed, needs to be owned up to, needs to at least, be honest about. And I think that reminds me of another thing that I wanted to say was, I think there's another get out of jail free card here as a parent, talking with kids around sex and everything, is that, gosh, if you don't know, or if you're scared, or if you're confused, just tell them. Tell your kids, like, honey, when it comes to dating, mommy is just as confused as anyone else out there, And that would just free things up rather than making rules. I think I see parents going to making rules so much, and the rules don't make sense. Don't wear this. Don't wear makeup until you're 16. You have to come in by 10 and blah, blah, blah. Well, hello, what is that going to do? I don't get it. Like, you don't think your kids are smarter than that, So, like, just be honest. Your kids know your limitation. They know that you're human.
Yeah. I think of times, I can think of one time in particular, like one moment in particular in parenting, and this wasn't about sex, it was actually about drugs.
The other favorite subject.
Where my son shared something with me that just, you hear it in my voice now, like I was speechless. I had nothing. We were sitting in a restaurant. I just remember thinking I wanted to get out of that restaurant so bad. I almost ditched the check. I had reached my limitation in that moment.
Wow.
I didn't know what to say or do. And I remember saying that to him. It's like, I've got nothing here. I don't even know what to think, so I don't know what to say.
Oh, that's so sweet and so honest. And how did he respond to that?
He sat there with me until the check came, so we didn't ditch the check. And, we eventually, we look back on that whole thing now, we're able to laugh about it. We're able to kind of joke. And he waited. I mean, he was okay to be with me in my discomfort.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like, Mommy, I got nothing for you right now. I like that. So we have about 10 minutes left. let's summarize this. What are some points that you want to make sure that we leave behind?
I like the point you just made. Like, it's okay to be uncomfortable and it's okay not to go and it's not to know, and it's particularly okay to share that with your children. Your children will force you to grow in a lot of ways. I mean, I think that's part of what children do for us. They're growth accelerator units. They get in and they push the growth. And so expect to be
Wait a minute.
challenged.
Hold on. That was a really important point that you just said. I think a lot of time we forget that. Children are here to help us grow. Mm-hmm. We keep thinking that children are here so that we can make sure that they grow up straight and be well and healthy, and then we seem to impose a control mechanism to like keep them safe or something, and we forget that they're here to help us grow. So that when they make us uncomfortable, that's actually a good thing.
Right.
So don't freak out and don't make them wrong for making you uncomfortable. That's what they're supposed to be doing.
Embrace that discomfort, because that discomfort means you've gone someplace tender for both of you. And the tender places are where we want to be with our children. They don't always come in that moment where your kid crawls in bed with you and puts his head down on your shoulder and falls, nestles into your breast and angels sing. Like, sometimes those tender moments come in really awkward and uncomfortable conversations, or that moment where you open a door and you see something you didn't want to, but be willing to embrace the discomfort and be willing to know that there aren't hard rules here. So if you shoot for something general, you're probably going to have greater success. And something general might look like, I will not shame. I will be available. I will work to make things okay, rather than laying down, rules about how things go. But really, I think the big points are love yourself and respect yourself first, so that you're modeling that behavior, which more than anything else, that essence, that germ, is what keeps them safe and creates sexually responsible adults. They're going to learn that from you by the way you are or the way you're not. I mean, it goes both ways. That's what you've got, is the example that you set. So that's the big one. And normalize. Let this be a topic of conversation that doesn't cause you to hold your breath or curl your toes.
Well, and if it's something that makes you hold your breath and curl your toe, then hold your breath and curl your toe and say it. Be honest with that, instead of going to anger to shut it down. Mm-hmm. Like when you find yourself going to anger and make them wrong about whatever it is that they say and they're curious about, or whatever the situation is, all it does is it create that famous shame thing and shut it down and isolate and separate you and them, and then there's no more conversations left. You are basically saying to them that this is not safe, you cannot count on me to be with you in this place, and they will never open up again. And that's just really, that's just sad.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would be inclined to say it's never too early to start at some level that is appropriate for your child. It's never too early. And again, it's never too late. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you haven't gone here and you have to get in at the hard part, get in anyway.
Yeah.
Because your child is forming their attitudes about sex someplace. Do you want that to happen in an assembly in a gym at school? And do you want that to happen on the pages of a magazine or in pornography or in a movie that they see in a theater?
Mm. And you know what? We didn't say this one, but what just came up out of what you just summarized there is like, sex does change. Our relationship to our sex changes daily, monthly, yearly. And so let's not keep it as this is what I know and this is how it is. What if we as parents approach this as something that we discover together as two human beings walking on this earth together? Like take the pressure of of know-it-all and this is the right way to do it and blah blah blah, but to really like, oh, you're here now, we're going to share this journey together because I'm 47 or whatever age that I'm at, and this is what I'm encountering with sex. What are you encountering with sex at 15 or 12 or 13? I want to know so that we can share the experience. Wow, wouldn't that be so different?
That feels safe, right? That feels safe to me all the way around. Safe. It's safe for the parent. It's safe for the child. That feels very safe.
Yeah, and like there's so much forgiveness to that. It's like, well, I don't know. Like this is what I learned, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Anyway. So we have 5 minutes, so I need to bring us to a close. Thank you so much for being here today. Do you have any upcoming program or is there anything that you'd like them to know that you're offering?
As far as programs go, like I said, you can find me at lisamhayes.com or charismaticwoman.com. There's always programs and things going on at Charismatic Woman. There's lots of places to plug in. But I just, again, want to thank you for having me today, and especially thank you for doing this show because you are conquering some topics, girlfriend, that, no one can do it like you do. So thank you for all of the work you're doing in the world.
Thank you. All right. So I work with divorced women who are dating again. So if you are, one of those independent, strong women and are dating again and blending the families together, or also if you're in couples and that you're going through some form of crisis or some form of stretch that the relationship is calling you forth, I am your woman. So for every show that I do offer one complimentary discovery session. So if you're listening and you'd like to have some time with me, a whole hour all to yourself with me, just go to my website, either mayvucoach.com, mayvucoach.com, or sexlivesinConsciousness.com, and you can click on that little book your session button with me, and you're in. You're into my calendar. All right. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you so much, Lisa. We'll be doing more of these kind of conversations in the future to really talk about and helping parents out there wrestling with this sex arena so that our children will grow up sexually free and responsible and thriving. Have a wonderful week. Bye.